everyone, and welcome to the Philly Factor. I'm your host, Paul Perrello. Today, we are joined by an author who has written a holiday novella, Jubal's Christmas Gift. Dennis Skirvin joins us. He is the author of not only this, but a number of other books. And Dennis, I want to thank you for your time and thank you for this wonderful book that you've brought to our attention. So, welcome to the program.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Paul. Certainly appreciate you having me on. It's a great
Well,
honor.
it's very timely given the holiday season that we're in. Let me just give the folks a little bit of a background on you. Dennis is a retired tech writer from Wilmington, Delaware. He and his wife Flossie celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 2019. Congratulations! In this time where you're lucky if a wedding lasts maybe 18 months in this day and age. So
Yeah.
congratulations on that. That unto itself is a major feat.
Thank you very
Um,
much.
you're blessed with
55
three children,
now.
seven grandchildren. And
Yes.
you're a combat veteran of the Vietnam War and a Purple Heart Award recipient. And first of all, I have to thank you for your service to our great country. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. I greatly appreciate that.
Um, I think we have talked about this before, if not on this program, but on so many other programs, where the Vietnam veterans really maybe now are getting their um, rightful recognition after their contributions to the United States of America during the Vietnam War. They sort of just blended into the background many, many years ago, and now
Yeah.
we have come to respect and appreciate them, and finally give them their just desserts, if you will.
Well, that's certainly true now. But it was when you said blend into the background, they took their memories and blended into the background. The memories
Mm,
never went away. One of my book actually addresses that situation, but it's an entirely different book.
yeah. This book, Jubal's Christmas Gift, a holiday novella, it's the story of a kind old African American man who sets out to repay a good deed done for him long ago. And I'm reading from the back cover of the book. The quest leads him to an unlikely meeting with a struggling immigrant Polish family, making for an uniquely heartwarming story of love, gratitude, and genuine Christmas joy. And boy, do we really need a story like this today, given everything that this country has gone through. So I want to compliment you and congratulate you on this story. And as we dive into this story, who is Jabal? I mean, how did? And as I said, this isn't your first book. So who is Jabal? Somebody that you knew? Is it a character that you sort of came up with? So who is Jabal?
Well, actually, I pronounce it Jubal. Jubal
Jubal.
is he is a character of my imagination. I kind of based him on an individual I met back in the early 70s at the VA hospital, of all places. A very kind man, gentleman. And I have a very vivid imagination, Paul, and I always wanted to write a good Christmas story.
Hmm.
Uh, so I kind of wove it around this gentleman. And as you know from reading it, it's about doing good deeds for others and how a good deed can come back many years later and pay dividends, so to speak. And that's what happens in Jubal's case. He remembers a very kind act that was done to him when he was a struggling young man, down on his luck, and he met a philanthropist that was well known in the town of Wilburton, New Jersey, which is a fictional town. And he goes to see the man, and the man does something very, very nice for him, and he never forgot it. But unfortunately, he was never able to repay that kindness until many years later. And that's kind of the basis of the story. In the
Hmm.
meantime, there's also like you said, the Polish aspect of it. There's a family lives in Wilburton. It's a Polish immigrant family, and they're struggling as well. Um, and through the hands of fate, the two interact on a Christmas Eve, and it becomes quite a dramatic and quite a happy story.
Sure.
I've got a
Uh,
lot of good remarks from it and reviews on it for sure.
yeah. Um, the what I like about the book is that it's broken down into a number of chapters, and I found myself reading this, getting started, and then putting it down only because I guess I had to get to sleep or had other things to do. But it's one of these it's one of these stories that really pulls you in, Dennis, and you could put it down and pick it up, and in many cases go through the book easily within one or two settings for sure. Um, when you call it a holiday novella, what does that mean? So if somebody's watching right now, they're interested in the book, and they say, okay, so what does that mean, a holiday novella?
Well, it's certainly set around the holiday of Christmas. It's all about all the action takes place with Christmas in mind and comes to a climax on Christmas Eve and Christmas. And a novella is just a short novel. It's a
Hmm.
100 pages or so. Forget exact number of pages in the book. I think it was 112 or so. Um,
Yep, 113,
yeah,
14, 15.
113. So it is considered a novella. So it's a quick read. But all my stories are quick reads. They really are. They move very quickly, and you get caught up into them, and they're fast reads and they're enjoyable reads. And
Yeah,
I think anyone who picks up Jubal's Christmas gift will get a big kick out of it. Now's the time of the year. I tell everybody this every year. I said, if you're going to pick any time of the year to meet old Jubal, good old Jubal, December's the best time.
for sure,
Yeah.
for sure. Um, I'm amazed, and this, as I said, this is not the first book that you've written, but you started out as a tech writer. So I'm like, okay, how does somebody who is a tech writer by profession go into this type of line of work, writing, books like this? Because if there are two things that are at opposite ends of the spectrum, it would be tech writer and a holiday novella author. I mean, how did that come about?
Well, it's an interesting story. I started out at DuPont after I came back from Vietnam, and I
Hmm.
went to work for DuPont in 1968. And actually, I was a technician, a research tech. And it wasn't until a few years later, a number of years later, that they realized that I could write.
Right.
I started to go to night school, night college under the GI Bill, and finished at one school, Goldie Beacom, and then went on to Wilmington University. Um, But somehow or another, they found out at DuPont that I could write. So one thing led to another, and I had no formal training in writing. My father was a editor for the newspaper, Wilmington News Journal, and the
Hmm.
Morning News back then. And I always asked him, I said, Pop, what do you think I should do? When I was going to college, I was thinking the things that I really liked most about school was writing. Anything that had to do with writing, I just dove right into it. So, and then somewhere along that line, I got into writing fiction as well. So I kept asking my dad, I said, what do you think? You think I should go to college and just sort of focus on writing? His advice to me was, of course, I was about 30 years old. He said, no. He said, just write, start writing. And that's basically what I did, and I never stopped. But I had my father in those early years he was the editor. So
Right.
I'd hand him something I thought was absolutely just perfect. And I'd get it back with red lines all over it. And I say to my wife, I said, I'm never going to get this craft. I'm never going to get it. But, it took a long while, but that's how it started. And then one thing after another, they used me for tech writing at DuPont. And then I started to write video scripting, do video script for them. And I knew nothing about video scripting, but I learned real quick
Sure.
and I got to like it. And the technical writing, the video scripting, and I really loved it. But my main
Yeah.
thing was writing fiction. I still loved to write fiction. And a funny story there is when I was at DuPont over Christmas break one time, I was on vacation and a young woman came up to me and said, Danny, we have to do a safety program in January, a big safety program for like the whole division. And there's going to be 400 or 500 people there. Could you think you could write us a play? And I ended up doing it over Christmas. And I'd sit out in the back and I'd be chuckling, laughing. And my wife Flossie would say, "What are you laughing about?" I said, this is, they're gonna get a big kick out of it." So anyway, I took it back to work. They loved it. All the managers from the whole division, they all got together. They formed a committee and they had somebody that had some stage experience, put it all together, and they put it on as a big show for about 500 people. And it was a huge hit, and it was called Shootout at Calamity. And it was a safety. It was a safety show, but it was like none other that DuPont had. And so it got legs, so to speak. It traveled around a lot of different places, and I became known in DuPont with all the upper echelon managers, and they started asking me to write plays for them, and I was doing it. I did about 5 or 6 of them in different areas. So, but at the meantime, it was my main love was fiction writing, writing novels. But I wasn't having a lot of luck way back then, and so I put a lot of these stories away. And years later, I started to publish these when I was, oh wait, 2018. 2019, the Christmas book came out. And then there's 4 more came out in rapid succession. And then, as you know, I did the one book with Dr. Davies, the Vietnam
Sure.
memoirs. And that came out in May. And then I'm working on another one right now. I'm about 300 pages into another one. And I hope to have it done by the spring of this year or of 2025.
2025. Yeah. Um, so do you find as you write more books or sometimes, I mean, I remember, and I just one of these days I want to sit down and I'm going to write a book. I keep saying that, Dennis. I want to do it, but I don't know. I know what the book's going to be about. I know it's going to be what's going to be in it, but I guess I just got to sit down, maybe lock myself in a room and then just do it. But does it get easier for you with every other venture you take on, whether it's fiction or nonfiction? I mean, not that it becomes routine, because I don't think anything really becomes routine. Because when it becomes routine, then you're actually bored and you're just going through the motions. But does it
Yeah.
become easier for you, Dennis, with every book that you write?
Well, the process has become easier. I think I've gotten better at it over the years too. Certainly, I've got improved uh, with it. And as far as being easy, I don't find it a chore at all. I mean, I really, my wife will tell you, she goes, "You got to get him out of that chair because he's sitting out there just, I'm lost. I'm in Wilburton, New Jersey, in a fictional town, or I'm with
Yeah,
Jubal, or I'm with this character from the short time, or I'm with that character." But I can get my granddaughter once told me, one of my granddaughters told me I had too much imagination. So I can really get into it. But a lot of people ask me that, says, I have a book that I would like to write. I'd like to get started. She said, "How do you go about it?" I said, "Well, just make up your mind and then start at the beginning and just go at it." And it's like anything else. I tell the kids it was like putting money in the bank. You put it in a quarter in or a dollar in, you work on it every day. You put a dollar in the bank every week, and before you know it, you've got a pretty good balance.
sure.
So if you work on it, same thing with physical fitness. If you work on it every day, you'll get it done. But a
Yeah,
key thing is that imagination and the ability to sit down and persevere and work your way through it. When I get to a knot in the story, I can be kind of miserable or kind of, you know, withdrawn. And
yeah,
my wife will say, "What's the matter? What are you thinking about?" I says, "Well, I'm thinking about some fictional character in my story that I've got to get this thing worked out." Um, when you get it worked out, then you feel a lot better.
yeah.
Yeah.
I I know every author has their own writing style. I mean, I've interviewed numerous authors. Some say, like I mentioned before, they just lock themselves away in a room for 2 weeks, and they come out with a manuscript 2 weeks later. Other people say they get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and and that's when they write, when the house is quiet and there are no interruptions. Then there are
Yeah.
those that say, um, I start writing the book uh, backwards. I know how the story is going to end, and then I start writing backwards to the beginning. I mean, and as I said, every author has their own writing style. So, And again, we can't paint with a broad brush here because everybody's an individual and they have their own way of doing it. But do you
Mhm.
have a certain style or a certain way that when you take on a project, when you take on a story that you know where you're going to begin and how it's going to end, or you just start and wherever it ends at page 115, that's where it ends.
Well, sometimes it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both, but normally I like to have the beginning, the middle, and the ending sort of figured out
Hmm.
ahead of time, and then you can add all the flesh and bones into it as you go. But I've done it both ways. Sometimes I would even take I would get a big piece of cardboard and I would make like a grid, like a
Right.
calendar, chapter one, and I'd have it all the way through, and I'd just keep thinking about it, and I'd have it through, and that's the easiest way because then you can just look at your diagram of your story, chapter one, two, three, four, all the way through to the end, and you kind of have it figured out that way. It's a roadmap.
Sure.
It's a roadmap. But like you said, everyone does it different.
Yeah. Um, in writing all of the books that you've written, are there any characters that appear in one book and then they show up again in a few books later, or is each book
No,
and each character they're pretty much all
altogether
self-contained?
different. I had an editor one time. She was a great editor. Her name was Robin Glandon. She passed away just a couple of years ago of cancer. But she used to tell me, she said, Denny, I work for a lot of people. I do a lot of work for people. And she said, but you're the only one that just you hit all the different genres. I
Hmm.
have a Christmas story, I have a Vietnam story, I have a young adult story, I have a fantasy story. The latest one is kind of a horror story, a Halloween horror story. So you might say I'm all over the map, but if a story strikes me, um, then I'm gonna then I'm gonna go forward with it and write it.
Right.
So it's not just one genre like romance or young adults, but people have pretty much every story I've written, people have come up to me and say, "You got to write a sequel. You got to write another one because the characters in this story were so endearing and so interesting and so wacky or whatever. We got to have more of it." So there's a couple of my books that I've thought about doing a sequel to. So we'll see.
When, yeah, well, you never say never, right? You never say never.
Right.
Uh, when and you talked about how the whole idea for this story, Jubal's Christmas gift, came about. But do you draw when you're doing other writing for other stories? Um, is everything based at some point on your own life experiences? Obviously, the book on the Vietnam War is rooted in your
Yeah.
experiences in
Yeah.
Vietnam, but and you talked about the characters in this new book of yours, but are all the stories have some type of thread that connects you with the characters in the book, whether it was a personal experience or a person that you met 40 years ago, or maybe somebody you met 4 years ago?
Yeah. Well, there's not a common thread to it, but there are some connections, that's for sure. Any writer, they'll tell you that there's a little piece of me in every story,
Hmm.
and and it's certainly true with me. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and divulge, where I fit in, but
Right.
there's a part of me in every story. Um, and it's kind of neat because you take those life experiences and with your creativity and with your ability to write fiction, you expand or you take away or you add, and that's pretty much the story with me.
Hmm.
I can't picture, for instance, in the Vietnam story, there was a fellow that, or even the Christmas story. In the Christmas story, in the character, there's a policeman, there's two policemen. And in the Polish family, there's a young woman who's has two sons, and her husband was killed in Vietnam. The story was set back in that time, soon after
Hmm.
Vietnam. And the young policeman, meets the woman and takes an immediate liking to her, but he's a little worried because he was a Vietnam veteran and he survived. he came home and he says to his partner, he said, I can't help thinking that she might have some reservations about me because I came home and her husband didn't.
Mm.
And the partner, who was a Korean War veteran, the older veteran, the police veteran, he said, well, you're going way off there. I don't actually, I've known this young woman for years, and that's not the case. But the part about that guilt, that survivor's guilt, and that's brought up in the story. The older cop, the Korean veteran says, you're just feeling survivor's guilt, and that's what happens.
Sure.
So that was something I had to deal with in my life. So there's one piece of a story, a small piece nevertheless, but it plays a big part in their relationship. But it was about survivor's guilt. So, and I
Mm.
had, I had experience with that firsthand. So
Sure.
those things, those life experiences do play a role. They have to play a role.
Sure. Absolutely. Um, often like to ask authors that are guests on the show um, for their advice because oftentimes what happens, um, people say, and I just said a little while ago, oh, I want to sit down, I want to write that book. And I know from doing this for as long as I've been doing this, that it's one thing to say it, it's another to do it. It's not an easy job in fully immersing yourself in the process. But I know there are probably a lot of people watching this, students in particular, who will say, "Yeah, that's what I want to do," but I don't know how to get started. And maybe this goes back to the advice that your father gave you. Yeah, I know I want to write. I know I like to write, but I don't know how to get started. So, what do you tell them? What type of advice can you give them?
Well, one thing I have told people is if you like to write, start a journal. Keep a personal journal. That's a big help.
Sure.
And I did that for years. Keep a personal journal and write in it every day, and it helps you. It gives you that perseverance and regimen to do something every day as far as
Hmm.
writing goes. Um, so that's a good way to start. Um, there's writing classes all over.
Hmm.
If you want to write a novel, I mean, I didn't go that route, but there
Hmm.
are, and there's help online to set up how to start writing a novel. But again, my advice is, do some read. If you read stories and you see how other people do it, um, jump in, jump
Sure.
in, and then expose it to other people and get some criticism back, and you'll grow as a writer and you'll get better at it. So that's kind of the route I took.
Yeah. And it's important to take that criticism and put it to good use. People hear the word
Right.
criticism and they want to just like hide in the closet because they just can't deal with somebody. Like you said, your father handed you back your papers with red markings all over the page, but you gotta, I mean, they're there helping you, and you're only going to get better by taking that
Yeah.
criticism and making
Yeah.
it work for you. So be able to take the criticism and accept the help to make you a better writer.
Yeah. When you're young, you might think, gee, this is the best thing that anyone ever wrote. And the whole world is just waiting out there to see what I have to put out, you know,
Hmm.
and it becomes a shock when, that's not the case. So
Yeah,
you're just in line with the rest of the write. You have to come up with an original good story, and then your readers will follow. You'll get a
sure.
following. But you have to be able to take that advice and know that, you know, unless you're Charles Dickens, started out very, very early in life and started writing right off to the top of his head and put out these unbelievably terrific novels,
Yeah,
you know, chances are you're not going to be another Dickens.
yeah. We just have a few minutes left in the program. We can go on and talk for about another half hour. But
Yeah.
the moral of this story, then, Jubal's Christmas gift. What is the moral of the story? When you sit back and you finish the 115 pages, um, what's the moral of the story and how does it apply to each and every one of us today?
Well, the moral of the story is kind of like um, the good deeds that was mentioned in the story. Good deeds are like investments in the future. Properly made, they will pay dividends for a long, long time. And that's kind of harkens back to what happened to Jubal.
Sure.
Jubal was down on his luck, and he had this gentleman that paid him a wonderful, wonderful good deed, got him a job, got him help, that and the other. He fell on hard times. He always wanted to repay it. But years later, he remembered it. He kept remembering it in his mind that he wanted to repay that good deed. And from that one good deed, other good deeds sprung off of it. So the moral of the story is to do good. Always strive to do good, to help your neighbor, help your fellow man and woman through life. And that's basically it. And it's written in a happy way that people will enjoy, and that will come in kind of on the side,
Yeah.
subliminally. Did want to say, Paul, that all the money I make from my books, I've donated to the charity, and same this year. And this year, I'm going to give it to the group down in Dover, Delaware, a veterans group, Canines Assisting Service Heroes.
Oh, that's very nice. And where can we find your books? Tell us where we can find, especially now, if somebody's looking for a gift for the holidays. This would be a great book to pick up. Where can we find them?
All my books are on Amazon. And also, I have a website, and it's my name, Dennis hyphen Skirvin, Skirvin, Dennis hyphen Skirvin.com. And you'll find me online. All my books are there. And like I said, all the proceeds are going to charity.
Oh, that's great. Dennis, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for this book. And when your next book comes out, we're going to have you back and talk about that book as well. So I want to wish you happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we look forward to speaking with you again in the new year.
And thank you very much. And same to you. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and God bless.
God
Thanks for
bless.
having me on.
Sure, my pleasure. Dennis, thanks for being with us. That closes this edition of the Philly Factor. My name's Paul Perrello. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll catch you the next time around.